to start off, I would like to start the panel with Dr. Indah first. I would like you to share what's driving the growing momentum for ESG adoption across ASEAN, and how are regional dynamics shaping national priorities?
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the question. I think to answer your question, as we know that business has two main drivers, which is the buyers and also the investors. So I think both are the main drivers to push ESG into the implementation of the business. Because now the investor is now moving towards ESG impact investors or green investment, and also the buyers now need their supply chain to be green, and green means that a very wide definition from the social aspect, from the environment and so on. And the other drivers could be a regulation. But of course, in ASEAN countries, the regulation may be diverse. There are some policies that are advanced in some countries, but there are also policies that is just in the beginning of the process. So I think that's the main driver for the business to implement their ESG.
And for Esther, you are one of Asia's early ESG pioneers. How have you seen corporate sustainability evolve in the region? What distinguishes Asia's trajectory from Western markets?
Well, good morning, and I just arrived last night at 9 o'clock, and it's so buzzing here, and congratulations to Malaysia. I stayed next door, in Singapore. Well, I think if I look back at my 30 years, humble journey in sustainability, when I first started, life was much easier. Very lonely, but easier. No need to fly here, fly there, and just to advocate sustainability. The first 10 years was very slow. Even in Singapore, we actually, for those who may not know CDL, we are a developer, just celebrated 60th anniversary. We headquartered in Singapore, but we operate in 29 countries and regions. We build home, commercial property, hotels, we have 160 hotels worldwide. So sustainability started as more like environmental conservation. Our ethos we established in 1995 was conserving as we construct. And now, without knowing that, 30 years later, it is more relevant than ever, because we need to take care of the planet first. If we don't conserve resources and all, we will not be able to take care of people and market for businesses to thrive. We are a listed company, we are private. We need to talk to our investor. We have obligations to maintain, provide job for our people and our supply chain also. So the whole involvement today is quite different from 30 years ago. In fact, less than 1 month ago, we were actually at Climate Week, New York City. And in fact, before I went, we all thought that this is going to be very washed down and not quite exciting and all that. But below and below, it was like 1,000 events over 1 week, 10,000 people running around and all. So humanly not possible to cover so many. So I mainly part myself with Climate Group and also UN Global Compact. Sustainability now, you have to really articulate it with business case as the main driver. You can't tell my investors that, oh, it's for long-term resilience. 10 years, 20 years later, you will know. They will not buy this story anymore. So now the runway is much shorter. 30 years ago, I can say long-term resilience. But now, they have to look at, you need to balance it with near-term benefits. What ROI can you really bring back to the company, to the investors? So these are the very important aspect. Anyway, we are only 5 years away from 2030. Not that near, not that far. And then for SDG, less than 20% are on track, the other 80% are not. So climate action is one aspect that we need to run much faster. So I think that the whole involvement of sustainability journey, you need to run faster, you need to look at business case, you need to align with global best practices and also national agenda. So the so-called ABC to me is like the alignment, you need business case, and C is very important. C represents climate first, very important. Carbon management, very important. And also collaboration. You can't do it alone, especially ASEAN now is in the best position to drive change because of our rapid urbanization and fast development. I always say that, when I'm overseas, I always fly that Asian and ASEAN flag, that this is the moment for us to move up from the back seat to the front seat. Yeah.
So talking about the runway getting shorter, I think we have a very good, diverse new voice on the panel, Mr. KK from Masverse. Blockchain has been touted as a game changer for transparency and traceability. How do you see it transforming ESG reporting and accountability in real-world applications?
Yeah. So the question, for the question, I have 2 points for that. The first point is the ESG reporting. The second point is the supply chain. Yeah, because ESG reporting, we all know they have 3 steps for it. The first step is the ESG assessment report. The second thing is the ESG standard operator. So the third thing is the ESG carbon credit exchange, right? So for the point is, when we say that like Vera standard, like Gold standard, when the standard in every country is differences, right? So where's the how to trace the ESG report in real time? Yeah, because all the ESG report is, we call that ex post reporting, right? Ex post reporting, that means when we did 2 years report, so after that we go back to see the report, the result on the report. So that's the main point to make the time shorten is blockchain can be the real time data reporting. Yeah. So that's the first point. So the second point is, when we talk about supply chain, is scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, right? Scope 3 is the point to point. Yeah, that means where we involve many parties inside, many countries inside. So we will affect a lot of the auditor, the operator. So if the data is exposed data, so the efficiency will cut the value, right? So when we can make the data immediately, so it's the real-time data, so the report will be valuable. Yeah, will cut down the cost, cut down the audit cost, cut down the operator cost, makes the carbon credit more efficiency can go wide, not just in Malaysia, Singapore, China, maybe US, can go worldwide. So that's the point that we have to bring up.
And I would like to direct the next question to both Dr. Indah and also to KK, tackle together. Dr. Indah, how effective are ASEAN's sustainability frameworks in harmonizing the ESG practices now? Like, where do you see the gaps are? And KK, where can blockchain come in to address some of these gaps through the technology?
Right.
So I think talking about the frameworks, it could be very tricky because the framework itself is good to guide the private sectors, but to implement the framework, I think that's another question. So many of, for example, because IBCSD has a parent organization in WBCSD, we sometimes revert to WBCSD frameworks on any case like environment, energy, and also social aspect. But when we try to implement in Indonesia, I think we need to adopt in the local context because different culture, different capacity of the manpowers, and also financing, etc. I think that challenge for implementing the framework itself. So if you ask how effective, I think it really depends on the readiness of the country. So I think I believe from Ms. Esther, sorry, you mentioned about collaboration. So IBCSD also play a role as a platform. We try to bridge communication between the regulator or the government to the business. Where is the gap? So I think that's also an important process.
Yeah. So for me, the framework is have to localize. That's totally agree. So the second thing is the platform that we need to create. Yeah. So what blockchain can help with the platform is we have to know what is the fundamental of blockchain and what blockchain can help with the data, right? So if a factory their data is just for internally, So we can foresee that the data will not go on chain, because just for their internally, right? So when we talk about scope 3, ESG scope 3, that means the data have to be on internally to external, to third party to verify. So the data will be on chain. Then after that, can go back to the ESG reporting, ESG framework. Then after that, come out the blockchain-based system. So let the carbon credit become the tokenizations. So can on the blockchain-based system can trade around the world. Yeah. So that's the fundamental. That's the infrastructure that blockchain can help.
Esther, how can companies move from compliance-driven ESG to strategic value creation that delivers measurable business and societal outcomes? How do we turn this from an obligation to? Yeah.
It's a long story on that, but can I chime in and our love and pride and joy and tears on sustainability reporting? And I'm sure everybody knows that sustainability reporting and the framework, the global framework, as we are talking, is still evolving. And when I first started 18 years ago, it was just GRI. Life was simpler then. Just GRI and UN Global Compact 10 principles. So, and then over the years, and then now you have the ISSB, of course, TCFD is now subsumed under ISSB, and then GRI is still going very strong. We just hosted them last week here in Singapore, and ISSB is supposed to be a very good concept to consolidate all the, hundreds of ESG rating, rankings, sustainability framework and standards and all. But after 3 years now, we are still struggling, to tell you the truth, right? We still have as many framework as we can count, with more than all our hands here. And of course, we look at the regulators to look at it, and then most regulator now is pledged to be aligned with ISSB, okay, which is backed by IFRS, which makes sense because ESG and financial reporting should go hand in hand. And when we talk about ESG, you have to put, financial value to it, not just they work in silo. Actually, no one will say that climate, environment, social, and governance have no financial impact. In fact, there's a huge impact and all connected. Whether it's natural capital, human capital, is all have a huge impact on financial capital. And if I may continue my ABC story, D is very important, data, digital solutions. Without data, you can't report, because nowadays, we are not talking about story anymore, not just qualitative. We have to back by data. You can't just show your chairman giving ang pao or package to the poor anymore. You have to show data. Otherwise, you won't score in all those, ranking or MSCI or CDP and all. And I think globally, we actually, most of the company have global presence. And I think apart from our own local, taxonomy or rank, or green building standard and all, you need to align ourselves with global standards. And there are plenty of such framework, apart from ISSB, GRI I talked about, and TNFD, which is actually putting, financial impact on nature, which is my new love. I'll talk a little bit about it. And then, of course, CDP, very important, measuring carbon, measuring climate, and also forests and water. So all these are the global standards that companies can align with. And it is a common language. Whether I talk to my investor in Canada, in Australia, or Timbuktu, everybody know what CDP is all about. Yeah? And then TNFD also is a global standards that we need to look at nature. You can't solve the world's climate problem without looking at nature. There are two sides of the same coin. And now, ASEAN or Asia, we are very blessed with natural resources, but we are also highly vulnerable. So if we don't look at nature now, we wait until loss of nature really hit our GDP badly. As it is, it's already affecting 44% of global GDP, urban GDP already. And in fact, when I picked up TNFD 3 years ago, I didn't know that. Actually, about 50% of the whole world's GDP are moderately or highly dependent on nature. Why? The ecosystem services. What the food that you're eating, fishing, agriculture, almost everything. We're in the hospitality industry. We're also building sector. Building sector account for 50% of natural resources extracted from planet. So there are almost everything you look around is about nature, and nature has high impact on businesses and all. And then, if we don't have data, we can't manage. Only, sustainability reporting is, I always say that it's like your medical check. If you don't check, you don't know whether your sugar level, blood pressure is healthy. So every year, we must have sustainability report to look at our environment, social and governance performance. And only with that, then you can win the support of your investors. You can access to sustainable finance. I launched the first green bond in Singapore in 2017. We were actually at that time 10 years behind Europe. But now, Asia, especially like country like Japan and Singapore and and the ASEAN collectively, our sustainable finance is getting quite high. Even Malaysia, and I think we are really doing very well now. Asia may have started a little bit later, but we are running very, very fast now. So I think in order to access to capital, to enable action, to deploy technologies and solutions, those don't come free. Right? I'm sure banker will know, right? So we need bankers to support. We need also, the most important one is actually coming up is the insurance company. You don't want your assets to become stranded assets. So you need to really dish out very strong ESG performance, not just operational performance, not just backward-looking performance, but strategy. That's what TCFD is all about. And now, of course, under ISSB, is also looking at strategy, not just operationally to get data from scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Supply chain is another issues that you can talk about it one whole day. But safe to say that we need data, we need collaboration, we need to empower our supply chain, because if they don't provide me data, my scope 3 data will not, be credible. So we are engaging supply chain for the past 2 years, enabling them and empower them to learn carbon accounting, carbon reporting. Tough to engage SME, but we have no choice. In Singapore, 90% of our enterprises are SME, and they account for 70% of our workforce and 50% of GDP. You don't talk to SME, large company will not have data and will not be able to report. Yeah.
And I mean, we talked about challenges and we talked about gaps a bit. Now I'm trying to pivot a bit to what we have done right as well. Dr. Indah, what policies or coalitions are proving most effective in channeling sustainable finance towards high impact projects in emerging markets in this region?
Yeah, I think that will be almost similar answer like Miss Esther, like we talk about regulation, finance, and also the business itself in practice, because I think that's the important element when we talk about transformation. Like every business needs money, but when the investor or the financiers require some, ESG implementation programs, so they will follow. And also about regulation, sometimes there is a gap between the regulation and also the business understanding about why factors. So my concern is because, now there are so many requirements, there are so many regulations. I'm afraid that the business only fulfill or checklisting all the requirements without knowing why. So I think not so many people or like Miss Esther understand that all the food or everything comes from the nature. I'm afraid that's the mindset change that needs to be pushed to talk about ESG and also sustainability.
And Esther, I mean, you did speak about how Asia, the region, is catching up. Not just catching up, probably now we are on par in terms of pace. But do you have an example about something that happened at maybe CDL, how ESG initiatives have tangibly improved resilience or open new investment avenues for the company?
Yeah, well, we build home. Everybody, even you are not in the real estate sector, you live in one, you work in one and all that, right? We started with like green building. Why green building is important, we provide spaces for work, live and play. And then we move forward to after, Paris Agreement, especially after COVID. And everyone, home buyer included, appreciate nature. we actually started very early to invest more spaces in terms of like, landscape, the green and blue spaces, but it did not really fetch higher in terms of selling price. But because sometimes it's the right time, right place. After COVID, you know that everyone loves going to the park, going to the garden, fresh air and all that, right? So it also helps us to really look at our product. How can we really design with nature in mind? And now today, actually a lot of products, a lot of home buyers show their preference for buildings with, greenery and with, with a blue feature and all. And it is very important because Singapore is warming up twice as fast as other parts of the world. And all these, needs to, heat and health are very important. Whether you are workers, whether you are homeowner who don't want to live in a place that it is cooler, healthier and all. So that actually help us to design, and step up on our products, and we're really selling very, very well. And nature-based solution is also one area. We, even 10 years ago, 2014, we already look at nature. How do we use nature-based solutions to build, a 24-story high wall that can actually shield the wall that, for 48 master bedroom that is west facing. West facing means you have a lot of afternoon sun. So it really helped us over 1 year's survey. It actually cooled the internal space by up to 3 degrees Celsius. And it is amazing. And when you talk about cooling the urban spaces, it's not just about technology. Technology is very important, but it's not all. We have to look to nature for solutions now. And of course, technologies that can improve energy efficiency is most important, because Singapore is land scarce. We don't have space for enough space for solar energy and all, and we have to look at also regional green and carbon carbon offsetting and REC and all that. I'm sure my friend here is going to talk more about carbon trading and offset. It is real solutions that we need it, especially for a country like us. We just don't have enough space for renewable energy. But technology is very important, and nature-based solutions go hand in hand in order to make our urban spaces more livable, cooler, and also very important, lives and livelihood of people depending on comfortable natural environment.
Okay, we are running short of time, but I would like to ask a last question towards KK. If you have any examples as well, about how tokenization is reshaping access to sustainable finance, or how blockchain can democratize investment. Are there examples already in the region that you can share?
Yeah, so we talk about the
democratizing investment.
Okay,
Yeah.
we talk about democratization and tokenization. So we have to know what is the difference of tokenization and traditional finance, right? So tokenization and traditional finance, the main difference is the fraction, right? Fractionalized asset. So tokenization, when we talk about carbon credit, we trace all the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 to all the supply chain. So after that, we can count out the carbon credit. So after that, we can count out a blockchain-based system to do the trading, right? So if we have the method, or we have the standard on it, so all around the world, all around the countries can join in to the platform. So like not just in like Malaysia, not just for the NFC, SME, and around the world, and around like Singaporeans, like Thailand, right? Like all the countries can join into the platform. So just create a wallet. Maybe in Malaysia, we can count out like purpose small money. It's a new method of stablecoin in Malaysia. Our bank guys is already come out with the method, right? So we can build on top of it. Let the purpose small money become the settlement. So just within the platform, right? And the platform can serve the democratizations and the tokenizations. Let all the parties can join in, right? Then we can trace all the carbon credits within the supply chain. Yeah. So that's the whole point and the main point of the tokenization on carbon credits. Right. Mm.
Great. So that concludes our time for this panel. Thank you so much, Esther. Thank you, Dr. Indah. Thank you, Kitty.
Right.
I would like to. So before I introduce the next and final panel for today, I would like to just give a short introduction on our talking points for the next panel. Next, we're going to talk about cross-border carbon shock, Asia's high-stakes trade test. Europe's looming carbon tariffs and deforestation regulation put ASEAN's exporters and China's industrial giants on notice. Fragmented ESG regimes may no longer be enough. Carbon intensity is becoming a direct determinant of competitiveness. We'll explore whether bold moves on carbon pricing and sustainable green supply chains can keep Asia ahead in a trade system where carbon costs and due diligence are built into every deal. So I would like to now invite to this panel Dr. Weini Chen, the head of carbon markets, Bursa Malaysia. Ms. Oyi Chew, the Chief Executive Officer of Climate Impact X, a carbon markets platform. And Dr. Vishuan, who is the Head of Climate Solutions at BCPG Renewable Energy Company. Welcome everyone. I would like to start with Doctor, obviously. What lessons can we draw from Bursa Malaysia's and Climate Impact X's early market experiences in terms of liquidity, credibility and corporate uptake? I think both of you can tackle that question. Yeah.
Sure. I think first of all, thank you very much to Bloomberg for this opportunity for Bursa Malaysia to be here this morning. And I think with regards to the lessons learned, first of all, maybe backpedal a little bit, why Malaysia actually have the carbon exchange. Obviously, one of the reasons is because we need to actually pivot the whole ecosystem towards a more greener economy, and also, of course, to raise awareness among corporates about all these pending cross-border kind of a CBAM that is actually arising. In terms of the liquidity, I think it's fair to say that in any nascent market, and I'm sure it's faced globally as well for the VCM, it has been rather muted kind of a market. And largely because it is very new, especially in Malaysian corporates. You asked about the Malaysian corporates. Many of them are still trying to make sense of what is carbon market all about. Why do we need to actually invest and what's in it for them? So I think this is where Bursa Malaysia as a national exchange, we actually provide a lot of capacity building. And also, of course, when we have an exchange in our home ground, then it actually spurs a lot more interest in actually trying to put up an ecosystem. And I think this is where Malaysia, although we have very few carbon projects, but one of the renowned ones, like the nature base, we have the Kuamut in Sabah, that's around 83,000 hectares. That is really one of the best in class in the IFM. In terms of biogas, we have a lot of opportunities. We have over 450 palm oil mills in the country. And recently, a few months ago, BCX just auctioned the very first of the biogas project from the Monsoon Langkam. And I think in terms of the credibility, that is of course a very big issue. There has been intensive scrutiny among the independent carbon standards. And this is where I think independent standards like Verra, Gold Standard, they are working very hard to tighten their methodologies and also improve their baseline. And we do have see a rise of the meta standards like the core carbon principles put up by the ICBCM and also CORSIA listing down their eligibility criteria that actually helps to foster the credence of the independent standards. But at the national level, you also see among ASEAN countries like Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia as well, we are starting to develop our own national carbon standard. And that standard is important to actually foster, when you have a sovereign-backed carbon standard, it helps to actually foster some market confidence. I'm just going to pause for you now. Thank you.
Mr. Oyi, yeah, you can.
Thank you. Dr. Weini shared quite a lot of similar views. But I want to sort of go back a little bit to sort of 21, 22, when there were a lot of issues around the integrity of supply, creating quite a lot of the greenwashing allegations of corporate. So the market somewhat collapsed during that time. And what's happening in the West today, I think that's not really helping so much in that. What's the interesting observation that we're making around corporates? They are no longer, they're doing it, and there's still very high conviction of the carbon markets, but they're not really out there telling people what they're doing, right? Partly because it's the same with many of the initiatives that are happening where corporates have decided, you know what, we know what's the right thing to do, we're going to do it, we're not going to be visible about it. So from the carbon markets point of view, the corporates with very high conviction levels continue to execute. And the reason is because they see the impact of their growth and their economic activity impacting the environment in a very significant way. I mean, some of the examples are the big tech companies who have massive data center presence know that every growth of a data center is going to have a huge impact in power, in water, and the environmental impact is something that they want to make sure that they think about and are thoughtful about. So today, if I meet a corporate who can talk to me about carbon markets, generally have very good foundations in reporting. They understand their transition planning, they understand their decarbonization planning. They understand that actually the carbon markets are actually a very strong complement to that. But as I said, because they're not really talking about it out there, it feels like there's sort of nobody else cares. But we know that there are corporates who care and care very, very deeply. So I think that's point number one. The problem with that is it doesn't then encourage what we call on-screen activity, because a lot of these are now what we call OTC, what we call off-market. They certainly need a suite of services, including clearing and settlement, which we help them do. But it also means that there's no pricing transparency, which I know this is a topic we'll cover later on, which is very critical to support the projects. Because in the project financing piece, if you don't understand what's the product that's being sold, it's very hard to then finance the underlying projects. I think that's the number two. So number three, what's I think really exciting is we were New York Climate Week. As Esther said, everybody thought it was going to be boo, not many people, it's going to be boring. It was hugely buzzy. I think helped somewhat by the UN turning up in town. But I think more and more we are less, I think we're starting to fix the supply integrity issues. Today, the conversations is how do we make the demand signals a lot stronger, and whether or not it's a combination of the main stakeholders, governments, shareholders, customers, and financial institutions. How do we bring all of that together, whether in a voluntary market or a compliance market, that we can then start signaling strength and demand, and therefore put more confidence back into whether it's the nature-based projects which Asia desperately needs capital for, or any other technology solutions that are very, very exciting as well.
Thank you. I'd like to have Dr. Vishwan just chime in as well. How can regional carbon markets and exchanges prepare firms for cross-border carbon pricing and regulations?
BCPG is a renewable energy company. We produce electricity from the renewable energy source, and that's why we have the carbon credit projects in Thailand. And later on, we enter into REC markets in Thailand and in Laos. And even though Thailand is one of the very first country that have national carbon credit standards, we have TIWR since 2014, and the market is still very early in development, and to get the price signal, that's very important for the firms in Thailand. And what we have is more like a call to check of the price. You know, when we want to make transaction, we have to make a call. That's very outdated method. So having platform would really help companies, especially in the early stage market, carbon market like Thailand and other ASEAN countries. So the price discovery and benchmarking would help the firms to plan for the future carbon costs that they have, and remain competitive in the carbon market.
So, Dr. Vini, coming on to that, right? I mean, we talk a lot about cross-border. So, how do you think carbon credit quality and verification standards can be harmonized across the region, to prevent arbitrage and build market confidence in that sense?
Yes, so I think this is where I'd like to introduce the ASEAN Common Carbon Framework, and I'm very glad to hear that actually, Mr. Gurdeep, you actually jumped ahead and introduced that in your speech already. And basically, when Bursa started off the exchange, one of the reasons is, of course, to build the ecosystem. And in Malaysia, projects are still very few, demand are very low. And so this is where in January 2024, Bursa actually conceptualized the idea of the ASEAN Common Carbon Framework to address the lack of supply, the lack of demand, and the lack of talent pool of resources. And very importantly, the ASEAN Common Carbon Framework operationalizes the ASEAN strategy for carbon neutrality, an initiative put in place when Indonesia was chair of ASEAN in 2023. And to this end, I'm very grateful to the ladies here because we are all belonging to the ASEAN associations here that signed together to actually operationalize the ACCF in COP29 in Baku last year. So one of the key tenets of the ACCF is that as nations actually develop our own standards, a fast way of fast tracking it is through perhaps a recommendation to do a mutual recognition of methodologies. And when you do a mutual recognition among methodologies, and that would make sense because geographically we are very similar. So therefore the opportunities on carbon projects will be very similar. So the effect of doing this mutual recognition is that we harmonize the standards. And when we harmonize the standards, it helps to improve the market interoperability. So one has another spill effect over the other. And of course, when you have a sovereign-backed carbon standards, just like what Thailand is having, Indonesia is having, then that will help to actually foster the market confidence. But I think with regards to how do you prevent carbon arbitrage, I think EU is trying to handle that carbon leakage through imposing their carbon pricing onto the developed nations. And while the principle of it might be good, but whether it violates the UN's principle of the common but differentiated responsibilities is really very questionable. But I think a much more maybe equitable way is that while we have a lot of opportunities to decarbonize in this part of the world, why not turn the table around instead and apply the same carbon pricing and be willing to pay for that 1 ton of emissions reduction and removal in this part of the world instead of penalizing us. That way you will be able to see more of the financing that will be unlocked from the global north to the global south, which I believe is the principles of the CBDR anyway.
Oh, yeah, I think you can also weigh in on that.
So I think one of the broader concerns that we have in the market is the fragmentation issue, right? I mean, the part of the issue is carbon is actually not, in most countries, a regulated instrument. And so anybody can set up a carbon sort of credit shop, right? And you don't even know whether legitimate or not. But luckily, you know, Dr. Winnie and myself, we operate exchanges that are owned by the main exchange, so, you know, plug to us. But what's happening? Fragmentation of platforms delivering it, but also fragmentation of supply. So, and what's happening is clearly national standards are evolving. Because there generally is a recognition that national standards cater to the particular country and the particular quality and the particular projects that they have, which might be somewhat different from the Western world, for example. So one of the few initiatives that certainly ASEAN is trying to do is trying to harmonize that. I think some of the powerful forces that will come in the next sort of 2 to 3 years, not that far away, very powerful sort of mechanisms, and hopefully, you know, it gets executed, but it would be, for example, ICVCM has called carbon principles, which they're trying to, they have sort of a set of principles which they measure projects or assess methodologies against. That is becoming quite a powerful tool for corporates to use when they are looking at the quality of projects. But that's again a more voluntary spectrum. But it is starting to sort of penetrate towards, Singapore VCM guidance is looking at it, and certainly in Singapore's corporate claims guidance, we're thinking about the core carbon principles as a voluntary meta standard. The other two would be CORSIA, which is the aviation standard, which right now is causing a bit of a bottleneck because there's not enough supply. This is the one product that there's demand, but there's very little supply. And we're hoping that will open up, for example, I think Thailand is on track to be approved as a registry into CORSIA. That will be very powerful. And the third one is Article 6, which is the UN FCCC mechanism. And that sort of brings together both the voluntary markets and the compliance markets in a global type of mechanism that the underlying projects are likely to be quite similar. The question is, how do they then get approved by 6.4? So these three meta standards will hopefully drive a more common language. In fact, I think CORSIA and CCP or ICBCM will eventually somewhat converge. But hopefully with the meta standards, then people have a single language and can then trade, because as you can imagine, actually carbon is quite a global product. And so the more that we understand the variety of products, but from nature to technology-based, the more that we can make the right assessments and the more that we can make the right investments.
Dr. Vishwan, where do you see the information gap that exists today in terms of carbon data, pricing signals, or regulatory coordination?
In my view, one of the biggest challenge to scaling up carbon credit market in Asia would be a lack of reliable and inconsistency of information, and these gaps lies across the carbon data, price volatility, and regulatory coordination. For carbon data, I think the previous session already addressed it. It's very important to have a harmonized or standardized framework for ASEAN, and for the firms to have a standard reporting measures and methodology in reporting. That's very helpful. And right now we have so many standards, and that's at the cost to the business. So I think harmonize that and make it more standardized would help. And for the price volatility, having regional exchange platform that would really help improve transparency of the price and make firms and investor financiers to be able to price the risks more correctly. And last one is the on the policy. In my view, a delay and variety of and it's like very early years of the implementation of Article 6 and also a project under Article 6 are quite different from country to country, even in ASEAN. So that's also hinder a growth of integrity and reliable market, credible markets.
I would like to direct the next question across the panel, actually, from different perspectives. You might be able to. What do financiers you think need the most to underwrite decarbonization risk? Better disclosure, standardized metrics, or credible offset markets? Like what moves the needle the most? Yeah.
So I think this is going back to my involvement also in the energy sector. I think banks would really need to de-risk some of the projects that they actually provide the financing. And I think this is where we need to learn that if there is no demand, no real demand for the carbon credits, no long of takers at a certain price, it's going to be very expensive. So that would be one aspect. So which is why for Bursa, our call to the government's call for action is for Article 6 to be sorted out, the national arrangements. To that end, I think kudos to the government. They are developing the national policy on the carbon market, and as well as the National Climate Change Bill, which actually have provisions for the Article 6 which the previous speakers have mentioned, where most of the market demand is coming from. And also, of course, the carbon tax that we are planning to implement by next year. And in a few years, we may have the domestic emissions trading scheme. So demand would be very important. There is also, of course, the rise of the insurance as well as the rating companies that actually provide some visibility on the credence of the project that can actually help to actually de-risk some of the cost of the financing. But I think the most important part of it is how the government is going to underwrite it. So therefore, going back again, the government's policy must always be, I always call, underpinned by the 3 C's. It must provide certainty, there must be clarity, there must be also consistency. And once you have that, then the project is a lot more investable. Thank you.
I think financiers play a massive role in the full decarbonization strategy. If you think about on the energy world, 20 years ago, when banks and governments started thinking about moving or transitioning from fossil fuel power generation to renewables. And many people have told me this statistics. I'm quite sure, find the source of. Today, renewable energy is actually a far cheaper source than fossil fuel power generation, really, because the way that the financing structure has shifted has changed dramatically. And this is sort of with government subsidies slowly being taken away, right? Renewable energies are still, today, I think there's more renewable energy being built than there is fossil fuel. So I think it is very critical. It will take a long time, but it is very critical for financiers and governments to work together. Now, in the company's decarbonization, I think that's also something that I think all the sustainable finance associations are very, very focused on. But I would say in the carbon markets, it is very important to think about how do we increase liquidity, how do we engage with corporates, because at the end of the day, if we're not seeing, and it's not even just off-takes. I mean, off-takes are something that are a little bit off-market, and yes, it will catalyze the industry, but you do need a proper carbon pricing mechanism. And at the moment, in the VCM world, it's trading a little bit from the private equity market to the listed sort of corporate market. Every company, every project has a different unique feature, country differences, project type differences, quality differences that create pricing differentials that are somewhat hard to, for a corporate who's buying carbon credit, right? I mean, how do you know what's the right pricing? The second thing that will hopefully get a bit more developed is with the compliance market. Like for example, COSIA, what we're seeing is the large buyers are starting to think about just compliance and less about project features. So today everybody talks about pricing in this is a COSIA credit or eligible credit. They don't really say, okay, this is a cook stove project in Africa or a nature project in Malaysia. So I think those are key things that will help the market develop some pricing benchmark mechanisms that will be very powerful.
I think that so many significant factors play into this. Data disclosure is very important for everyone. And in terms of the classification metrics or methodologies to underwriting, standardized one is very important. And in my view, I would also say that the clarity of the policy is an essence in this situation.
Okay. Well, we are short of time, but I would like to ask another sort of roundup to gather your thoughts across the panel. A very short question. Are voluntary and compliance carbon markets beginning to converge, or are they evolving along separate paths? What's your...
My take is that they should converge. Why? Because liquidity begets liquidity. And once there's liquidity, there's better price discovery. And what you want to achieve is a unified carbon pricing.
Converge, for sure.
Me too, converge, for sure.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for participating in the panel today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.